Yeah, Sheldon Blackman there. Where's the fire? Fire in my people. And of course, the next line in that song is 2 is better than 1, and a 3/4 chord is not easily broken. And he's inviting, the people of his nation, people of the world to come together in that one. And he says, if we do come together, we are stronger. That's Sheldon Blackman, Where's the Fire in My People? And of course, when you hear that refrain, that melody, you know it's time for Indaba. And this is another edition of Such, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. I'm one of your hosts, Shabaka Kambon. I'll soon be joined by Dr. Claudius Fergus, former chair of the Department of History of the University of West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and an engaged intellectual himself, not confined to the ivory tower. So we're going to have him joining us shortly. And of course, we'll also be joined by another PhD tonight. That's Dr. Asha Kambon. And Dr. Kambon has been spearheading in recent years the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series. She's the energy behind that lecture series that we look forward to every year during the Emancipation Festival. And of course, the Emancipation Festival is kicked off with Iwa Africa, the fashion show, which has become such a staple of the event. And so now we're getting into the lecture series. We're going to get Dr. Kambon with us to talk a little bit about what we're going to expect. Of course, we're going to ask her specifically about the launch of the lecture series. And that's always a highlight of the series, because it features, generally speaking, one of the premier intellectuals of the African world. And of course, you can imagine the kinds of scholars who have spoken at that event. So we're always excited to find out who's next. And so let's bring up Dr. Kambon and let's get right into it.
Good evening, Shabaka. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, friends, and so at home.
Yes, I was just telling people that we've had some exciting, some of the leading scholars in the African world on. I see we're getting right into No, they're not giving me a chance to build up, boy. They're going right into the launch. All right, let's talk about the launch before we, and then I want you to tell our listeners and call some names of some of the people who've been with us over the years at this lecture series.
Yeah, this lecture series has really, as you mentioned, we try to bring prominent thinkers to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. We also, it broadens and deepens our conversation with each other. We get more information because to have a conversation, you also have to have some knowledge and your thoughts. It helps if your thoughts become clearer. And so our guests in the past have helped us clear our thoughts around various issues. So last year we were quite, how shall I say, both lucky and honored to have Dr. Gordon Lewis to speak about Frantz Fanon. It was the 100th anniversary of Fanon's birth. So it was quite appropriate that we found the leading scholar in the world. He happened to be Jamaican. So he happened to come from our part of the world. And he had done tons of work and tons of books on Fanon. Before that, the year before, we had the scholar, the best young scholar on Haiti. The work that she has put in to understand why Haiti is where it is, and the proposals she has made about how we can get Haiti out of its crisis are still being discussed today.
Jemima Pear. Jemima Pear.
That's right.
Yeah, she is the most preeminent scholar.
Preeminent scholar on Haiti. That's right. And she's
but just we don't have to go over in chronological order. Just call one or two big names and we go back to between Kwame Ture and Dr. Lewis, Professor Lewis.
Yes,
just call one or two of the names that have stood out to you.
Of course, Dr. Anthony Martin, our own Dr. Tony Martin. We've had Kathleen Cleaver, whom I absolutely loved. We've had Dr. Cynthia McKinney. We've had, oh my heavens.
Philip Emiguali.
Yes,
And
Professor
many a scholar, many a scholar. And of course, this lecture series, of course, builds on the back of those lectures that go right back to the 1970s,
Yes.
when you had people like Ben Buchanan and of course,
Yes, Dr. Asa
uh,
Hilliard and those, you see, and after what we had done from since the 80s, we began the Emancipation Lecture Series. And in that series we had people like Dr. Ben, Dr. Hilliard, Dr. Lynch, and so on. And they gave Trinidad and Tobago,
Ivan Van Sertima.
yes, Van Sertima. They gave Trinidad and Tobago a grounding in their African history and culture that I think cannot be surpassed in the region. And since then, we have tried to ensure as well that we keep on top of the current themes, the issues that are of concern to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean diaspora. So this year, we jump off with none other than our own Dr. Kevin Adonis Brown. When I chatted with Dr. Brown, I said to him, I hope you don't mind me calling you Adonis, because that's the name of my sister. He started to laugh. He said, yes, some friends do call me Adonis. It's a man's name, really, but my father was that type of person that would give you a male name if he thought it was appropriate. So at any rate, we have Dr. Kevin Adonis Brown exploring this notion of dismantling colonial legacies and the role of creatives. Dr. Brown is really a leading creative. He has won the Boca Lit Fest with a very interesting, I think it was the first time that a book of photography won the Boca's Lit Fest. He's quite an interesting scholar because he mixes notions of imagining, notions of the importance of rhetoric, of what we say, because I think he recognizes the depth of the oral tradition in the Caribbean. I mean, so that you could have poets like Buju Banton, you can have poets like our own Brother Valentino, and you know, one of the earliest, and he actually spoke at some of our Kwame Ture lecture series, but he spoke when they were the Emancipation lecture series, was none other than Professor Emeritus, who's now transitioned, Professor Gordon Rollaire, who I see similarities in their approach around issues of understanding literature and understanding where we stand in the middle of all of that. So Kevin really looks at where we are using our oral history, using our rhetoric, so to speak, using our creativity to address this issue of dismantling colonial legacies. I think it's going to be a very interesting, very different discussion. And that's how we launch and get off the ground here. This Sunday, it is this Sunday, June 14th. It is absolutely free. People have been asking me, oh, what's the cost of the ticket to get in? I said, no, the Kwame Ture lecture series is always free. For us, knowledge is sacred. So there is no cost. So we look forward to people coming.
And what is our venue this year?
This year we are at City Hall. And that's really historic. Huh? That takes us back to the days when Dr. Hilliard was here, when Dr. Jeffries was here. We used City Hall very often in that period. This year, we are back at City Hall, and of course, it's well refurbished. It's very nice, and we look forward to having a great evening. We thank the mayor of Port of Spain, His Worship Chinua Alin, for his support in making that venue possible and available to us. And so we look forward to a very interesting evening. And that's June 14th on Sunday at 5 p.m. Please come early, bring the children, bring the family. As I say, these are conversations that enrich us. These are conversations that deepen our knowledge and our ability to engage with the much that is going on in the society today. And there is much going on. So following Dr. Dennis Brown's, Dr. Kevin Brown's presentation on the 14th of June, the 21st, we go to dismantling colonial legacies again, but here we look at the issue of violence and we ask the question, what are we not getting right in addressing violence in Trinidad and Tobago? I mean, so much money is spent, so many billions are spent on the police force, on all sorts of policing and many things. What is it that we're not getting right? And what do we need to do? And we will have two very interesting presenters there. Then on the 28th of June, and these, by the way, all the other parts of the lecture series are online. So I urge you to look for those links. They're going to be floating about. Get those links and get online. It will be on the Emancipation Support Committee Facebook page. They will be on the YouTube channel. They're on June 21st. We look at the first issue of violence. On June 28th, we have a very interesting discussion. New globalization, challenges to the Caribbean order. What's going on in our own Caribbean region? And there we have conversations with Ambassador David Comisiang and yourself, Shabaka. So we really look forward to that discussion. On July 5th, we are looking at rising Pan-Africanism. And that should be a very thought-provoking discussion. Of course, our own Dr. Claudius Fergus will lead that discourse. And we have a very rich panel with Dr. Ibn Chambers of Ghana and hopefully our colleague from the CARICOM Secretariat. And on July 12th, we round off the series with Can We Overcome Our Economic Legacy of Colonialism? And here we have our own distinguished Dr. Ralph Henry, Dr. Kira Niles, young, bright economist attached to the Institute of International Relations. And we should have a very interesting discussion on this issue of economic legacy of colonialism. So that's the way in which the series will unfold. As I mentioned, we launch on this Sunday at City Hall at 5 p.m. We expect a very, very interesting discussion with Dr. Brown. And then all the other sessions thereafter are online. So you've got to follow the series, jump online, either at the Facebook page of ESCTT or the YouTube channel.
Indeed. Okay, so our first presentation this Sunday is live, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and then thereafter online. And of course, you can come to join us here on Indaba for all the details. We will remind you of what's coming up next after this particular Sunday. And of course, we're looking at the role of creatives in the decolonization process. Very interesting. Just something even for me to just wrap my brain around, you know, the role that creatives have played in the past, and the kinds of roles that they could continue to play in the present and the future. Very, very interesting conversation indeed. Let's see what comes of it. Of course, we are excited indeed. Of course, before we move to the next segment, I must tell you that Kelvin Baldio Singh is at it again. He's taken one of your articles on his Facebook page, and he's labeled you. This is an article in which you clearly speak to the malaise of Indian and African youth. He's ignored that commentary, and he's labeled your piece Afrocentrist PSG blames white people and rich people for the bad state of black people. And of course, when he says black people there, he means people of African descent. But yeah, we will talk about that maybe perhaps later in the program or on the next edition of Indaba. Baldio Singh back at it again. He was quiet for a little while, but all right. Let's welcome Kyle. Kyle, welcome to Indaba. Kyle is joining us now. Kyle is an attorney at law, and he's going to help us try to make sense of what's taking place right now under the current state of emergency with what appears to be an attack on our constitutional rights, a stripping away of our constitutional rights, a suppression of our right to assemble, and indeed perhaps even our freedom of speech. Welcome, Kyle. So
good night.
Good to see you, my brother. Let's start off by first speaking to this to the actual legislation that is causing all the controversy.
Well, I want to tell you thank you again for having me on the program. It's my honor, and I was really excited to speak with Dr. Claudius Fergus as well, because he taught me at the university. But I guess he's having some trouble.
Yeah, let's hope he comes. Let's hope he joins us before we
You really opened my mind
gets
at
to
a
see
very
what how his student has progressed.
Yes, I remember presenting to him in like tutorials were very nerve-wracking. So I was very trying to get myself prepared for tonight. Anyway, in relation to the regulations, I'm not sure how much how deep you want me to go, but I would say that the regulations are, in a sense, based in or gets its authority from our constitution. So within our constitution, it provides for moments of emergency situations. Now, this particular emergency situation, you remember in 2011 there was a state of emergency. There's a case from that, or 3 cases that were heard together in the Court of Appeal. That a decision was made in 2024, and there is still a decision pending before the Privy Council in that case. But in essence, that case, in a sense, has reasoned that in these circumstances, the courts give a lot of weight to the executive, which is the legislature, the prime minister, and the government, because the court would believe that in these circumstances, the legislature, the executive, has information privy to them that the court wouldn't ordinarily have. So they give them the benefit of the doubt, in a sense, right? That whatever the circumstances that were the advisor they got from let's say the Security Council would have warranted a calling of a state of emergency. That's in the broad.
So, yeah, but that's the state of emergency.
That's the broad.
I think what we want to talk about is the yes.
Right. So I'm drilling down, because really and truly, what these states of emergency and the regulations do is strip away powers or strip away rights that you would ordinarily have under the Constitution, your constitutional rights. And there's the argument that in certain circumstances that may be necessary, but the court looks at each circumstance on its own merit. So each circumstance would have to be, in a sense, justifiable or justified by the police officers and the persons who are carrying out the regulations. So as we drill down now to the protest movement that is currently happening, and the whole describing certain areas as places, again, another feedback.
Yes, Dr. Fergus has joined us, so we're getting the good with the bad here. Doc, perhaps you have 2 different devices on at the same time, because we are getting some feedback. And between your presence and that feedback, we're breaking Kyle's concentration.
No, I'm fine. I'm just saying. It's really for the audience.
Yeah, for the benefit of our audience. Well, we have Renee. Let's salute Renee. She's in the background. Renee, you got to resolve this matter first.
Okay,
and perhaps give us some indication that we can proceed. Doc? Okay, we're still getting feedback. Okay, so Doc, while that matter is being resolved, Kyle, let's continue. So we're talking now, you mentioned that within the current state of emergency, we have, there is a new development. You've given us a sense of what a state of emergency means, and then to contextualize this latest development.
Well, and that's the thing. So each of these decisions by the state are examinable by the courts, right? Is whether or not what they are doing are reasonably justifiable. And that test really
Sorry, Doc. We're still getting that feedback from one of your devices. I'm not sure if you're using 2 or more than one device, as has been the case in the past.
Don't try that.
So no, this is the only thing I can explain. I don't see. I see Renee saying here. Renee is telling me that she's working on it. So perhaps if we mute temporarily on your side.
Okay, I'll do that because I moved the devices far away from me, so that I don't know how they're interfering. But I'll mute. So go ahead.
Okay, I think it's already resolved, perhaps. Okay. But yes, Kyle, please proceed.
So each matter, really, the court will consider certain questions. Some of these questions are whether the regulation is rationally connected to the objective. What objective are they trying to achieve? And whether or not the implementation of this regulation is rationally connected to that. Whether a less intrusive measure could have been used and achieve the same purpose. Whether having regard to these matters and to the severity of the consequences, a fair balance has been struck between the rights of the individual and the interests of the community. The essential question is in each case is whether the legislative measure in issue strikes at an acceptable balance between the rights of the individual and the general interest of the community. So it's always a balancing exercise, whether or not their institution of having these places as zones of no protest was rationally connected to their the object that they were trying to achieve, right? Which ordinarily should be in relation to crime, because this whole state of emergency is in relation to crime and criminality and being out of control and giving police extra power that the police would not have been able to exercise or grant citizens the safety that we require using the ordinary power. So give them a little more power to be able to achieve this purpose of securing our safety and making sure that there's order and public safety within the society. So the court will examine each decision that they make. But I wanted to say as well, I looked at the article today, and we have been under state of emergency for a very long time. And I think people are not really grasping the significance of it because there is no curfew and because an ordinary citizen may not really be impacted by the measures unless, well, they run afoul with the law or they get in trouble with the police. But the reality is, what is happening now, but from my experience as being an attorney, the police, it is supposed to be that the police arrest, and ordinarily, the police are not supposed to hold you for longer than they ought to. So they have a certain amount of time to hold you because there's reasonable suspicion that you committed an offense, right? But the state of emergency regulations have removed that need for reasonable suspicion, and they can hold you on what is called inquiries. Now, generally speaking, police are not supposed to hold you and then do inquiries. This was our reasonable suspicion to holding you, and if in investigating they need a little more time, they could hold you for that time, but they are always supposed to be able to justify each minute they have you. So that is how serious the court considers our fundamental rights and freedoms. Each minute that you are in custody is supposed to be justifiable. But the police are now, they in a sense get a crutch now, where they could just say that they are holding you under the emergency regulations. And that way, a senior officer at the station could allow the detention for up to 7 days. And we're seeing in some instances, you're there for 7 days and no further investigation is being done. Like they are not with alacrity or with some seriousness investigating what they hold you for in the first place. They just realize that they could hold you for this long, so they're keeping you there for this long.
Hold you, yes.
And that is also connected to the PDOs that are being issued, the preventative detention orders that are being issued by the minister, because you're seeing persons being held, and then at the end of a state of emergency, they're all being released. So I saw an article today where between July 18th and 2025 to January 31st, 2026, that's the first state of emergency. No, that was the first state of emergency. That was the second state of emergency. The first one was December 30th, 2024 to April. That was right before the election. That first state of emergency, they arrested 50 persons under PDOs and 13 were charged. That's a 26% of persons who were arrested and were charged. So that means out of that 13, 37 persons were arrested and kept there for however long, and released later without charge. So those 37 persons, their constitutional rights were violated. And there was no recourse. They may later on take a matter, but really and truly, your fundamental rights is such a thing that even if you take a matter to the courts later and you win money, the fact that you were subject to those conditions for that period of time, there's nothing that can really buy back that for you, right?
Yeah, boy. Yeah,
So
the way those things work on people when you're innocent. But let me go. Let's go back to what we were saying about the new provision in the law that stops people from protesting within the bounds of, I think it's within 50 meters. What is it? 500 meters of certain government offices and so on.
Yeah,
let's talk about that, because that doesn't seem to me, as you said, these measures are supposed to be about crime prevention. That seems more about the undermining of our democracy and fundamental freedoms than crime prevention. You tell me.
It seems so, because it's not my words. The Prime Minister would have gone to the Parliament and the Attorney General and would have, in a sense, argued for the state of emergency, and now are arguing for the extension of a state of emergency. And they would have listed what is existing that is causing the state of emergency. And so if it is enriching the crime, then these protest matters, which are peaceful protests, because I would say I joined the young sister in the recent protests, not because generally that I agree with everything that's being said, but I agreed that she had the right to say what she is saying, and she ought to be able to be allowed to say what she said, especially since that her protest was a peaceful protest. And the same day of that protest is when this new regulation was launched. So then we see like a direct or very close connection between the protests and this regulation to ban protests around certain buildings. Now, in hindsight, I could see a little bit of why you may not want to protest outside the DPP's office. DPP is a very sacred person in our society, and he's protected by the
premises.
Yes, so it may not be the best idea to have like a disturbance outside his office, which is fine. But going back to the issue of proportionality, the notice that was sent out with all those buildings, was that really proportionate? Are we really prohibited from, let's say, protesting outside the port? If port workers have an issue, can they protest outside the port? Is that really connected to public safety in this instance? I don't see it.
And Kyle, have you explored the contrast between the rhetoric of the current leader when she was in opposition and the approach that she's taken to the repressive approach and the intimidation that she's encouraging from the police at this particular time?
Well, yes, and I think everybody has recognized the disparity in when our current Prime Minister was in opposition, and now her being in government. When in opposition, nearly every time there's a parliament sitting, you could see that there was an attempt to bring supporters to the parliament to protest. And now you have listed the parliament as a no protest zone. That is, to me, I don't want to get into politics, but I don't see that as being I see that as being hypocritical. I just didn't want to say that.
Yes, that's a good choice of words. Now, Kyle, let's talk specifically now to the young people who might be interested in continuing to utilize their constitutional rights in this democracy. What options are open to them now, under this new creeping authoritarianism that we're seeing now? How can you advise them to proceed so that they don't find themselves, with undue charges and weighed down by the state through the courts and so on?
I'm glad you asked that, because I did consider some of those things. And in studying history, in a sense, in my respectful view, protest needs a certain amount of strategy. and knowing what you want to achieve. And it needs a intention to correlate the narrative or the ideology to get everyone on the same page in relation to what we are protesting and why. So for instance, I'll just give you an example of the recent protests in relation to Joshua Samaru and Kaya Sili. In particular, whether or not the particular issue is or can be challenged right now is questionable, because the matter has gone before the DPP. The DPP has given instructions to propose charges, and that matter has to go to the court and would be ventilated in court. So in a sense, you can't really address that matter directly. But what you can do is then say, well, look at different topics or issues you want to address that stem from that matter. So things that the rest of society could agree with. For instance, if you say, well, we want to address things like body cameras, police officers should wear body cameras. It's a line of transparency and accountability. And we want to be able to see what's going on, and that will also bridge the gap with the whole trust in the police service and those kind of things. Or when there's a police-involved shooting, let's say there's a policy where a senior officer from a separate division comes to investigate this matter. So there's that appearance of independence. So there are different things to me. Persons who are intending to get into, let's say, protests or this kind of thing, the narrative needs to be clear, because you don't want to go out and then there's a spin on the narrative easily, and then you find yourself you need public buy-in. So you need other
this to me is a very challenging issue, because what we're essentially saying here, if we're not careful, is that protests have to be led by the educated middle class, because the masses, don't have a right to express themselves, if they don't have the sophistication to analyze and purse
I'm more saying that the protest has to be strategic.
I understand that, but what we're talking about here now is a clear demonstration against police brutality in our country. And what hurts me when I think about what is happening right now is that during the Black Lives Matter movement, the middle class went to the savannah in front of the U.S. Embassy in their hundreds, perhaps, and they protested there. When the masses finally came to join the protests, they were, the police left the middle class. In fact, there's a great clip if you want to get a sense of how the difference in treatment. And I think the difference in treatment between classes by the police is a big factor in the protest that's going on right now.
I have seen it.
It's a big factor in why so many of the middle class do not join the masses in these kinds of demonstrations, because they don't feel like it affects them. But I'll give you the example of the Black Lives Matter movement. There was an incident where a policeman, who was accompanying the police commissioner at the time, came into the crowd, and a young middle-class gentleman took his hat off and stamped it on the ground and so on. And, of course, there was no repercussions for that particular young man. But now the masses are coming through Port of Spain at that same time, peaceful protests coming up Frederick Street, and then met with tear gas and all kinds of other instruments of repression. There's something that this colonial structure that we have here wants to keep reminding, the poorer sectors of our society that they do not have the same rights as the rest of the society. And that is also replicated, not just in the protests, but it's replicated. What we see in how they're treated when they come to peaceful protest is also replicated in their treatment when it comes to violence and how the police interacts with those
in general.
I don't know how many times you've been on your way to Juve or something, one of those large public events, and you see police routinely stopping cars with people from a particular class and having them involved in all kinds of humiliating exercises on the side of the road that to yourself as you're driving past, you would not be subjected to.
Yeah.
You don't even think for a second that they would stop
Well,
your car and engage you in that way. And
sometimes
you
they
know,
might. There are sometimes until I speak.
but it's very interesting. Again,
Yeah.
because you wear a hairstyle that might implicate you as a member of that particular class,
Yeah.
you might find yourself subject to
Yeah.
such mistreatment and abuse. And so I think we have to be very careful about how we speak about these things so that we don't add to the disempowerment and the marginalization of the masses. We need to find ways now to create spaces where those people from among those classes who want to participate in constructive, peaceful protests, that we can support them. And I think we have to make a much greater effort to guide and to ensure that they're not being, as you were saying, their message is not being manipulated and misused.
And they have the opportunity to give the message. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We have to be very clear about that. And it's not always that the masses are going to speak in the same language, with the same vocabulary, in the same style and structure as the middle class. And they have to have a right to be able to speak in the language that which is sort of native to their space. Is sort of So I think we have to be very, very careful about how we're treating with this issue, not to end up siding with this repressive state that is being generated right now, even inadvertently.
You saw it recently when there was a peace walk or something planned on the Israel River side. And you saw it, like when police came to the gentleman, they were telling them, go from here, go home. And that's the interaction. And then they would tell them that to certain persons, and then you would see them standing, looking at an interview by, I think it's Fuad Khan.
Abu Bakr, you're talking about?
Abu Bakr's son.
Yeah, he's taken his fair share of repression as well. But yes, you can see that there's going to be a difference. The first time I saw the way that police treat the masses, and I think we have to be very clear about this. I remember as a child, we had a Emancipation Support Committee event at a hall inside Laventille, somewhere inside Mobile Laventille. And I was outside talking to Andre Tanker. And I got up for a minute after Andre and I finished our conversation. I just got up and stepped outside the grounds now into the neighborhood in Laventille where we were having this event. And I see a young man walking up the street and two police officers walking in the opposite direction. And when they get close enough to him, they just jack him up against the wall and start cursing him and kick his feet apart. And I say to the policeman, and this is me as a teenager, a young teenager, I say, why are you treating the young man like that? And then, of course, they start to use obscene language against me. I respond and they respond. And eventually I had to make haste as they try to intimidate and become more violent. This was my first experience. In the Black Lives Matter movement, I went down into the area in Carnage there, Hague Street. Mm-hmm. And the young men in Hague Street, they play football on a basketball field, which is right next to a large drain. They had to cut a hole in the fence of that thing because they wanted to come out during the COVID, because that was the same period as COVID, and play football in the daytime in that thing. And police would just come in and start beating everybody. Now, you contrast that with what was taking place in West Moorings. If you went down to West Moorings during the day at that time, everybody was out in the road, walking their dogs, riding bicycles, etc., all around. No chance that the police would come in there and start beating people for disobeying the curfews, the impositions of the COVID restrictions. But in Carnage, in Hague Street, the police, they had to have young people outside warning the footballers that the police are coming so they could escape down into a drain and run for their lives. Otherwise, the police might break their heads. This is the difference in the reality that we need to call out at some point, because this is creating more violence in our society, particularly in those groups that they say are supposedly more, more inclined to violence because of their circumstances. This is definitely a factor in that violence. I think we have to move to our closing remarks, Brother Kyle. What would you like to say in closing on this subject?
I just like to say generally, I agree with you that you want to create a space where everyone feels welcome to be able to share their views and to be heard. And I want to say, despite the emergency regulations, and even though it seems or it appears that there's an intention to silence your voice, it is very important that we, all of us, continue to remain engaged and remain interested and try as much as we can to make our voices heard and contribute and support others who are doing the same. And sometimes you may think that you're not affected because you don't have a curfew, nothing is really bothering you. I'm not a criminal, but a lot of persons are being arrested. A lot of persons are having their rights stripped away. And you don't want to wait until it's you, People say wait until you reach
it. Gosh, Kyle, you just made the ultimate point there, and I just want to bring it home to people just in this way as we wrap up this segment of the program. You take the celebration by, let's say, white Americans in the United States of America, throughout all those decades, particularly from the 1980s, when there was this, sort of abrogation of the rights of African Americans and non-white Americans, all the abuse by police, which resulted in so much death and so on, that eventually ended up with the Black Lives Matter movement. Now you see those same repressive measures being used on white Americans. The chickens always come home to roost. What goes around always comes around. Yes. And so the middle class that is now celebrating the fact that the police can, and the state could treat a particular segment of the population a particular way because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect them today. But tomorrow, they can be driving down the road in their Bavarian Motors car, what have you, and the police get accustomed to treating people in a particular way, and they decide to treat you in that way. What is your recourse then? When you've allowed the society to be eroded in such a way. Well done. I thank you for that point, Kyle, and
thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on it.
My good wishes to Dr. Fergus as well.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we're still gonna get Dr. Fergus to give you a grade for tonight.
Okay.
Take care, Kyle. All the best. Yes, Dr. Kambon, we have you back in your capacity now as an international civil servant to talk to us now about the recent inclusion of Trinidad and Tobago as, I guess, a temporary member of the United Nations Security Council.
Mm-hmm. Yes, good evening, Shabaks again. And this is very interesting. So I love talking about the UN here. So I think it should start with full disclosure, which is that I worked for the UN for about 20 years. And so I have my biases about the good work that it does and the challenges that it faces. But let's look at this issue of Trinidad and Tobago being elected as a non-permanent member of the UN. First, we should point out for people, just for their own knowledge sake, is that this is the third time Trinidad and Tobago has faced this particular role. The first time was in 1985-86 under the then Prime Minister George Chambers. Then in 2002 and 2003, it was under Mr. Patrick Manning that once again we accessed this role of being a non-permanent member. And this is the third time for the 2027-2028 term under the leadership of the Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. What is interesting to note is that we accept this role, or we are nominated for this role as part of the Latin American and Caribbean component of the LAC group then in the UN. And just to give people a sense of that Security Council, there are 15 members. As we all know, there are 5 permanent members who can hold the veto power. Those people are China, Russia, France, UK, and the US. Africa has 3 members, are allowed 3 members on that 15-member body. None, of course, hold the veto power. The East Asia group, which includes China, has 3 spaces. So with China being a permanent member, it means there are 2 spaces for other East Asian members. The Eastern Europeans hold 2 extra spaces. That's besides France. So they have 2 other spaces. And the Latin American group has 2 spaces. One now being occupied by Trinidad and Tobago. Western Europe and other states have 5 spaces altogether. Now, I was examining this issue and thinking what might be some of the critical issues that Trinidad and Tobago may find itself embroiled in, or having to at least participate in some way on these, as it is a member of this this Security Council. And there are 2 kinds of grouping of issues. I look at the regional issues and the global issues. And under the regional issues, we're really talking about issues such as the economic blockade of Cuba. Without a doubt, that issue is going to somehow find itself needing addressing at the Security Council level. The other issue are the kinetic strikes in the Caribbean seas, which have devoured over 200 lives already. And that too may need to come before the Security Council. The Haiti crisis, without a doubt, will come before the Security Council because of those 3 global issues. The only one that actually has been addressed by the Security Council is the Haiti crisis. The other 2 are being managed and run and imposed by the hegemon of the region, and has nothing to do with the Security Council. The General Assembly of the UN has voted unanimously over and over again, and I don't remember how many votes, passed how many resolutions for the economic blockade of Cuba to end, indicating it's illegal, it's against international law. But of course, the hegemon in the region continues its and has tightened its grip around Cuba, making life, really, really impossible for people living in Cuba, for Cubans. And of course, the kinetic strikes in the Caribbean Sea, international legal minds have all said this is illegal. It is like extrajudicial killings.
So you call out the 3 main areas in the region right now.
Yes.
And Trinidad has obviously made some inputs into these 3 areas already. So what would we expect from TNT on these 3 subjects? Let's start with Cuba.
Well, before, I was hoping not to have to go there yet. I want to explore the global ones.
Okay, let's talk about what the global issues are now.
And then there's a very interesting piece of research.
Because I think the 2 things will be tied together.
That's right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you have, on the global level, you have the really outrageous and abominable and just off the chain, the notion of this board of peace created by the Trump administration for what they say the purpose is to bring comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. And it has, of course, we know that has just flopped, completely flopped. And what has happened is that the UN, the role of the UN in that maintaining peace and in support of the people in the occupied territories of Palestine has completely been obliterated by the current regime.
So maybe we could group all the issues in the Middle East into one issue. Yes. So the board of peace is really, one of the latest strategies or agendas of part of the group that is responsible for having organized or supported diplomatically or with arms either the genocide of the Palestinian people, the bombing of Lebanon, and the war with Iran.
Yes, those are all. The removal of the role of the UN in Palestine. with the they wanted the UNRWA dissolved and dismantled and so on. And then
yeah, and of course in Palestine we're talking about both Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
And the West Bank, absolutely.
Where there's increasing illegal encroachments of the apartheid occupation. And
then there's a second issue at the global level, which is definitely going to be on our plate in 2027 and 2028, which is the conflict in the Sudan. That's not going away. That's not going anywhere, and that has created the largest famine that the world has seen. And to address that famine, unfortunately, resources have been taken away from those entities within the UN that address famine and that support people in crisis. So this is going to be one of the issues that definitely will be on the agenda. The outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It is apparently a strain that is moving very, very quickly and rapidly. And with the reduced resources that have been made available to the WHO, it's definitely cramping the style and the ability of really the work of the WHO and its ability to manage that outbreak, to help control it and to save lives. Those issues are going to be on the agenda of the Security Council, I am sure, even though right now they're being acted upon outside of the Security Council. Now, I hit upon a very interesting piece of information which I'd like to share. And that is that, and let me see if I've got my glasses right here, that one of the interesting things that happens to those countries that participate that are as non-permanent members of the Security Council, very interesting piece of research suggests that they get foreign aid windfalls. Isn't that interesting? Those countries that find themselves as non-permanent members are somehow acquire foreign aid windfalls, an approximate 59% increase in U.S. aid, and an 8% boost in overall UN aid. And this financial influx often spikes during the years with key diplomatic votes. So, we have to look out for how our vote is going to be manipulated during that period.
Yes. So there's some suggestion that there's buying and selling of influence in the UN Security Council for these temporary members. Now that suggests that in our case, do we need to be bought, or have we already made our statements clear? Because what we're talking about here, if we look at the three issues you mentioned in the region, Cuba, the strikes on boats in the region, and Haiti, the United States has a clear agenda on those three matters. And Trinidad has already declared its allegiance to the United States of America. So there's nothing to be. We don't need any funds to change our position on those matters. Let's go down to the global section now. We're talking about the entire Middle East process. Yes. Again, the regional hegemon, the hemispheric hegemon, is heavily implicated in those matters, and with a clear position on those matters, and we have declared our support unconditionally. So I don't think we have any issue there. Let's go to the Sudan. Dr. Fergus discussed this issue a couple of weeks ago here on Indaba, and pointed out the way that great powers are involved in the Sudanese conflict, the way that they're implicated. Again, I don't see Trinidad needing any encouragement to not go along. Let's go down to the Ebola outbreak in the Congo, where we're not sure, how that matter. I don't think we've had enough time, and unless you are ahead of me on this issue, to decide how the world will want to treat with it.
Yeah, it's very.
But I think the overriding issue that you have raised is that and this movement again has been led by the United States of America to remove resources from the United Nations, to disempower and undermine the power of and the role that the United Nations plays in the world is being led by and I think that in itself is an issue for the Security Council. And again, I don't see Trinidad and Tobago, taking a position that is contrary to the stated and bold, strongly articulated, position of the United States of America. So I think this is a
very challenging situation, and I think the only way for those issues to be possibly to receive a different kind of attention by the present government is for the population to speak out about it. People have to be willing, as Kyle was just saying. Don't wait until it's you.
Yeah, but I think we need to be clear now about what the real point is here. The point here that I think you're making, and very, very, very that we just to sort of clarify for our listeners, is that when countries like ours from the global south find themselves in this particular important body, decision-making body within the United Nations framework, it's supposed to give a greater voice to the people of the South. It's supposed to mean that the traditional Western powers, the powers that were at their pinnacle at the end of World War II, when the Bretton Woods sisters were created, when the United Nations framework was brought to its current form. In that period, it's supposed to give a counterweight to those entrenched forces, which really represent the West. In our case, because of our size and the kind of aid money that you talk about there, and because the fact that we do not appear to be, taking a anti-imperialist posture at this time in our history, it's not likely that we will serve the interests of the global South.
Yeah, it's challenging. We will, and you see, it is a forum where our voices can be heard on these issues. The idea is that it provides a space where other what shall I say, different voices, different views get a chance to contend. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to influence the guy on the other side of the table who's already has his hand up with a veto, but at least you provide knowledge, global information. People are listening to these debates, and there's information that can be shared, and people can learn more and have a different sense of what the world really needs. But unfortunately, if we've received, or we think we're going to receive some of that 59% increase in inflows, and we are desperately thinking the way in which we will be able to survive economically, then we do ourselves a disservice. We do the world a disservice, and we don't play the role that we can play.
Indeed, and of course, just for the benefit of our listeners, there's people who may not be 100% following the conversation. The way that the United Nations is set up, the way that it's structured, is that all the countries of the world vote in the General Assembly, and those votes are non-binding. They don't. Nobody has to respond to those votes. So time and time again, you take the example of Cuba. The world thinks that what is happening in Cuba is unjust. And when we say unjust, we're not talking now about the regime in Cuba. We're talking about the regime of sanctions, illegal sanctions that are imposed on that country that is really causing the suffering in that country. The entire world has voted again and again in the General Assembly to end that illegal blockade. And of course, because the General Assembly's vote is non-binding, the blockade continues as always. The Security Council does have greater power, although there's a veto for certain nations to influence the situation there. And so this is the body that this is the decision-making body, central decision-making body, and it's never democratic because most of the nations of the world are not allowed to participate. And when some voices from the global south get to participate, it is generally temporary. It is only temporary, let's say, until such time as these laws are changed. So this is the situation that we're in. Let me see if we have any. There's a question here. What about the voice of CARICOM, or is TNT only representing the position of TNT? This is a very interesting question.
Only.
How would you want to respond to that?
Yes, it is. Yes. Well, theoretically, in the past, we understood the value of teamwork. We understood that we were committed to a wider region rather than just ourselves. But we are hearing from this current government that there's not much weight that they are going to give to the CARICOM perspectives and views. And it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic, because the strength of Trinidad and Tobago and the strength of any single island in the region has really been that body of votes that it can bring with it to a particular issue, which is the CARICOM votes in the UN system. And wider than that, the Latin American group. And now, because the CARICOM has been working closely with Africa, we now have that wonderful ability to not only discuss our views and share our views and lobby for the issues that are burning concerns to us within the Latin American group, but now we can bring it to the Africa group and get their support. And that's a huge number of votes. So when our current
well, it's not votes. We talk about the United Security Council. They don't have a vote. But what you mean, well, I think what you're suggesting is that all these various can have an input through us or through their engagement with us. Absolutely,
yes. And an influence.
And now it seems that we are not really inclined in that way at this particular moment in our history.
That's
which
right.
is very,
it's
very
up to the citizens. It's up to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to say, this is nonsense. We are not out here like a feather in the wind.
I don't know how
we are part of a wider group. We have that.
It seems to me that citizens in Trinidad and Tobago are losing their rights to assemble in certain, within 500 meters of certain government premises and so on. I don't know that the citizens are in a position to have their voices heard with this particular government at this time. I don't know if the government is open to listening to certain sectors of the population. But all right, these are the issues for people to think about as we go forward here on these subjects. Again, I want to thank you, Dr. Kambon, for joining us tonight on Indaba, and of course for sharing the good news about the launch of the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series. We want to thank attorney at law, Brother Kyle Cox, for joining us and giving us his insights on the current state of affairs, around the SOE and the creeping authoritarianism that we see, that we're witnessing. And of course, we want to salute Dr. Fergus. I know he couldn't be with us tonight. The technical problems overwhelmed him at some point, but we did miss his.
Yes, I was looking forward to having some discussion with Dr. Fergus. I missed him this evening. Yes,
indeed. So we want to say again a pleasant good night to our listeners, and we want to invite them to join us again on Sunday, first of all, for the launch of the Kwame Ture Memorial Lecture Series at City Hall in Port of Spain, in refurbished City Hall.
Yes.
And then next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Good night, everyone. Take care.
Good night. Thank you.